Welcome to the London Property Podcast. This is episode 28. We're actually in a new setting today. This is one of the collaborative's flats that they've just developed that's due to come on the market quite soon.
Yep.
Sneak peek of it here, just facing the kitchen. Yeah. But yeah, you've done a great job here. It's absolutely brilliant.
Thanks a lot.
Looking forward to getting it on the market. So what are we going to talk about today? A little bit of news. Scouring the news, it's quite difficult to find something. What I think is relevant is Hong Kong buyers. Let's talk about that. Now, kind of international travel is opening up a little bit more. There are significant increased transactions from Hong Kong people. It's gone up fourfold over the past 12 months, which is a significant amount. Where I live, we've seen an influx of Hong Kong people kind of coming into our child's school, for example, and one person that I kind of sent across a list of details for, they've ended up buying 3 flats, and they've said the lawyer that I introduced them to, they've actually like put another 400 or 500 off with kind of friends and family and stuff. So it's a massive influx into the London market, particularly in Central. For a tiny island, it accounts for 8% of the properties that are being purchased at the moment, and obviously that's because the British government have offered the Hong Kongers an incentive to citizenship. So that's something that's happening right now.
That's very
I think
interesting.
This particular property that we're in is kind of ideal. It's kind of like it's a period conversion, but it's almost like a new build. They're like newly refurbished stuff. So I'm sure you were kind of bearing that in mind when you refurbished it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just in terms of just general refurbishments and property development, it's just been one of those markets where we've found stock levels to be very, very low, and it's just been, for us, it's been a hard time trying to find the next opportunity. I know last time we spoke with Marius, you were saying it was the complete opposite in that patch you work in the Maidavale patch. But I think you're now finding my cycle catching up with yourself, is that?
Yeah, in essence, we were talking about it before the podcast. It's quite interesting because everything that's been good, we've got it under offer.
Yeah.
And it's quite slow because we've had like 28 sales agreed in the last 3-4 months, which is a lot, right, for 3 people in a small office. But now that kind of lack of new supply is slowly catching up because we need obviously stock to replenish what we've got under offer. So in a way I can see that slowly being more synchronized with what Jaffa was saying previously, that they can't really find a lot of good flats that they can develop, they can add value. I've sent you some options, but the margins aren't really there. And I think, to be honest, you're not the only developer that I get phone calls on a 2-3 weekly basis saying any projects for me, anything, because there isn't, right? And I've seen that on the ground, and now because we've got a lot of the good stuff under offer, it is really like we're getting some stock on, but it's not with the level that we've got things under offer previously.
And it is across the board. It's not just in Maidavale.
It is.
It is really across the board from all the conversations I'm having with all the other agents. It is that
the imbalance between the demand, which was definitely around here, like W9 and some parts of Central are kind of catching up, and it will be a lot busier when the international market comes in. But I know, for example, in the country, people looking to buy houses. I know for Savills, for example, there was such a massive demand for country homes, like estates, but then the supply was completely dire. It was literally like you had to know the right people to be able to secure stuff off market, and a lot of the good stuff would never even hit the market. So that imbalance between the massive demand and lack of supply effectively still there in a lot of parts, especially in central London.
For sure.
So yeah, we've definitely seen that, and it is quite interesting because before, I think 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, I was saying it's fine, we're getting new instructions, which we were, but equally we're putting a lot more under offer, which is a great position to be in, but equally it is slowing things down because if you don't have the right stock and you've got less stock, then it's going to be trickier to get the same level under offer.
And the reason you were saying you were taking on loads of stock previously, do you think it's anything to do with the fact that the stamp duty holiday, maybe smart sellers realised, you know what, to catch that stamp duty holiday, we're going to have to list it, like February, kind of March time. Now that we're April and June is going to be the cut-off, well, at least a taper, less sellers are going to be coming to market now, right?
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
We've had good turnover. We've put those under offer, and
now you're like,
see how things are actually going to be more like.
That's exactly
the rest of the year.
That's exactly it.
A lot of people. So we're seeing the starts of a slight cooling off, and that's going to be more realistic of because there's this big bounce.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people have thought, well, particularly myself, looking to buy on the outskirts of London, it was crazy.
You were looking around Richmond, right? To be specific.
We couldn't even get a viewing on something.
Because it was...
And it's already gone way over the asking price, and the agent's bragging.
Yeah.
So as an agent, I was like, you know what? I'll wait for this to expire, pay the higher stamp duty, and buy later on in the year.
Yeah.
That was my own specific choice. I'm not talking about central London, because it's different there, and it's still a great time to buy. But I think it's quite interesting. I think we've just touched upon something there.
And I think the lack of supply was also causing the prices to slightly increase.
Yeah.
I mean, just reading a recent report, it says that property prices have increased by 0.6% in the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's the first time that's happened since the Boris bounce.
Yeah.
Okay, and that just shows you, look, could this be the beginning of an upward trajectory of prices in prime central London?
Yeah.
Because, supply is really low.
We talked about that, didn't we, previously, because the forecast, definitely the Savills research and the forecast for the next 5 years. This year you're looking at, for 2021, at around 3%.
Yeah.
This is for prime central London specific, not the Main Street market.
Exactly.
Looking around 3% growth. And that will be because the there's not going to be all the great listings. There's going to be a lot of competition. There are buyers out there.
Yes.
And let's face it, again, we touch on the difference between prime central London, where the stamp duty saving doesn't make a difference.
Yes.
Even the 2% surcharge for overseas buyers doesn't make a difference, because the property values are very different. And there is still going to be a lot of competition, yet more to come, I think, later on when the international buyers get into prime central London. So like you said, you can see the prices slowly going up in line with inflation. I think next year we were looking at what, 4%?
Next year 7%.
7%, sorry.
Which is why I think next year will be a year where I think we'll be all run off our feet trying to secure the next opportunity.
Or people realise things are going up at 7%.
Yeah.
7% of something like
we've never had.
500 grand is a hell of a lot of money that people can't kind of earn and put in the bank and put forward. So you have to make a move. Particularly when 2-3% you can afford to sit on the sidelines. 7 to 10% you can't.
I've got a lot of investors now thinking, look, I've got money in the bank.
Yeah.
Do I leave it in the bank earning hardly anything, or do I start investing in property? And is now the right time to invest it? And I keep telling them, look, this is now. You either catch the wave now, or you're gone. Because there's no point coming to us next year. You'll miss the curve.
Or leave it in the bank, and like what everyone's talking about at the moment, inflation is likely to go through the roof.
Yes.
Look at it get eroded away.
Exactly.
Get it. What are your options?
Yeah. Because the interest rates are just it's not going to do you any favors in leaving it in the bank, and I think that's pretty much. It's always been like that. Your money shouldn't sit in the bank, unless you've got some crazy special savings account where the interest rates are. But the reality is, in the UK, that's not going to be the case, and property's always been the gold standard for long-term kind of security and growth. So I mean,
I think your money in some hard assets.
Exactly. Look at this beautiful marble. Exactly.
Should get you guys to sell my flat more often?
Listen, I've already done viewings on this flat, and I promised you I'd sell it really quickly. It hasn't been the case, but we're working on it.
The market must be private.
But very interesting. I think prices it'll not be crazy. Again, we talked about this previously. It's not going to be to the lengths that it was in 2012, 2013. No. It's going to be very kind of controlled. There are so many different measures with mortgages, and the market is really very at a different stage than it was, very more mature than it was in 2012, 13.
Definitely.
When we saw those crazy.
The fundamentals
spikes.
are much stronger than they were.
Absolutely.
But I think one thing that's really, really shown with prime central London is, look, we've seen Brexit, we've seen
a lot,
we've seen COVID,
in the last
and it just shows you how resilient this market is. And people tell me, why don't you look outside of central London? Why don't you invest in Manchester and all these other? I'm not saying there's a bad investments, but it just shows you how resilient this market is. it could withstand pretty much anything.
What you just said there about investments, I mean, people when they buy a property in Surrey or something like that, is it an investment or is it just a home that they're buying?
It's probably a home, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably a home.
Lifestyle
So
choice,
unless you get in at the point before people start to move, and we've had this lifestyle change of COVID and everyone moving, if you then get in after that, it's questionable about, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
How prices are going to move. When the international market comes back, Prime Central is going to be an area that people internationally are going to be putting money.
Yes.
They're not going to be buying in Cobham.
Of course not. Of course not. Yeah.
So we've just got to, go back. It is an investment market, Central, and it's not an investment to. Well, you can say it's an investment on the outskirts, but I think for different reasons.
Especially now, you can see a real opportunity. Like if you go on Lonres or you go on Rightmove or Zoopla or any of the real portals, you'll notice the 1-2 bedrooms are the ones that are really looking incredibly good value. And those are the ones where the international buyers are going to really target. So if you start picking up those ones, which is what we're really focusing on, is picking up those at very good prices. Those would, you'd hope in a year's time where you get that 7% increase, or you've bought well, you make more than that. So
the Hong Kong buyers that I was talking about right at the very start, I know that the properties that they're purchasing, they're around about £500,000, like 450, 500. Do you know what I mean? Cash, and it's that kind of stuff. So, completely agree with you. That is where the international market is going to be at first.
That's where the value is.
That's
where
and there was an article on it's a Global Mansion Global, that luxury website, and they were talking about how central London was actually the global city last year that saw the biggest number of super prime transactions.
I saw it.
Which, we'll put a link to that because I think that's, you always follow the money, right?
Yeah.
They say that, and that's where, if the super prime market, that's where it's getting these high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals, they're putting millions in stock in London. They're putting it for a reason. These are people who are very, 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 they're very financially savvy with what they do with their money. You're not going to put 10 million, because when you talk about super prime, you're looking at 10 million plus. You're not going to put 10 million or above into something unless it's a good time to put that money and there's no other better way to deploy it. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about, is buying in London or central London a good time or not now. I think is that headline is all you need to know. Are the super rich putting their money in central London now? The answer is yes. Have they been doing it for the last year was busy. We talked about this even in so many other podcasts where even before COVID we were like, yes, it's quiet, Brexit this, Brexit that, but there were still very big transactions happening, and last year showed, during the most unprecedented time we've ever had, the super prime market was booming, and there was more transaction in 2020 for super prime than there were in 2019. What does that tell you? It tells you that that's where there's so much value right now in central London. Then obviously we're talking about the prime market and the core market as well, not just the super prime, because it trickles down in a funnel, right? So there's still really good value. I think it just showed we've been so busy. Different markets will come back to life as soon as the international market is able to travel in, but I think even so, a lot of people are using their friends who are already in the UK and buying stuff without even seeing it. We've had cases in December. Remember the Hong Kong guy who bought something without seeing it, did a few video calls on FaceTime, and he ended up buying it. So
we did a video call as well, didn't we?
I was viewing the same flat for letting. There was a Hong Kong couple on Zoom.
Really? There you go. It just shows. So that people are buying, and all this about is if you haven't made up your mind that it's a good time to buy in central London, then you'll be losing the opportunity. It's as simple as that.
We just had a question come through from John. And he's basically just asked. He was concerned because he doesn't have any outside space in his property, but he said that if he's close to a park, is that going to make a difference? Ooh. Is that enough to make a difference with the value of his property?
I'll let you take that.
So we've got some interesting research that we were looking at, again, Savills research, they were saying if you are within 100 meters to a central London park, the property value went up by 15.3%. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Right, which is incredible to think that just the proximity of being to a park is going to influence the value of a property, and it just shows the change of lifestyle that we've experienced in the last 12 months now.
Yeah.
But if you're 50 meters within a central London park, or is it 21%?
28.1. 28.1.
Wow, okay, so that's
It's crazy.
a third nearly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's insane to think that a park can have such a big influence. And we were looking previously of how close people were to a tube station. That was a very big factor. Now, because people's lives have completely changed, people are not commuting anymore, they don't really have to go into the offices. That's actually become a priority. So being close to a park is become a priority, and the proximity to a tube station is fallen down in the ranks.
In terms of how much, what, 30 odd percent now?
What for?
Wanting to be close to a tube station.
Yeah, it's gone down by around 20.
So it was basically 39% of people thought that it was important to be next to a tube station previously, and now it's 63%.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, that I think that would have been more like 80%.
Yeah, because everyone was like, I need to be close to the tube station.
That's
I need
the
to
first
be.
question that they pretty much have on their requirements.
But
Now it's completely different.
Really good for area pockets around London which are just not close to tube stations. Like East Sheen is a really good example. Prices are booming over that way. It's doing really well. People normally wouldn't want to be there because it's a bit in no man's land, close to Richmond. Nice housing stock though, and really close to greenery. It's doing really well. So
anywhere close to park,
So the answer is
outside
yes.
Space.
Do not fear. If you live in a flat with no garden,
as long as you're near a park,
and see if you can find one close by, and ask the agent to make it a selling point.
It's crazy how much life's changed, because even from us, we had stock that was like, for example, focus on Maidavale. We had a nice stucco fronted 3-bedroom flat on Randolph Avenue.
Yeah.
That could be considered like prime stock for you guys.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden COVID hit. All of a sudden Randolph Avenue, Sutherland Avenue, garden flat, looking out into Greenwood Gardens. Now that's become prime stock. So it's a complete shift of the way people look at things.
90% of the people that I speak with want some form of outside space.
Yes.
And before it was like it would be nice, but it wasn't literally the top of the list.
Yeah.
And that's people's lifestyle has changed so much, and a lot of the property kind of demand in London. I think that's really important, because everyone talks about the stamp duty holiday.
Yes.
But really in Central, it doesn't do much of a difference.
No, it doesn't.
You're saving 15k max. Great to have it. But if you don't, you're not gonna, not buy £1 million property.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that. And we've said it time and time again. But what has been actually driving a lot of the demand is this change in lifestyles. Need to have outside space. Need to move out of a flat that is like, because if you're working from home and you're in a box room. I had a client recently. She was selling a 1.5 bed and she wanted a garden flat. And she was literally desperate that she lost on this garden flat. Basically, the transaction fell through, and she nearly cried on the phone because she lost that garden flat. She was like, "I need to get out of this flat by summer. Like, I just need to. It's not good for my mental well-being." And it just shows that's just pure lifestyle changes. People, working from home has changed everything.
Garden flat, having a garden is important, or some kind of outside space. But also maybe I found this a lot is. Look, we created a small room here, and the idea of having a separate room for your office, a study, that's huge.
Garden and study.
Garden and study. Two things that were never really that important have become huge.
A garden shed had never been such a big thing. I was speaking to one of my colleagues yesterday who's he's an agent actually, and he's just told me that he's built a man cave at the end of his garden, and it's everything in there, even with a beer fridge and stuff. And,
a lot of people have, because you do need to separate. If you're kind of mixing your living space with work as well, it's not the healthiest long term. You just the lines get really blurred, and this is what's been driving the property market, guys, in Central London, I think. Other markets, it's been mainly the stamp duty, but it's been a false kind of illusion with the savings, because again we've mentioned it previously. I was speaking with someone today, and a client, we've just sold this property, and he was like, I'm just going to wait because I think there's going to be a slowdown in all of this kind of craziness, and once people realize that they're overpaying for properties. This was out like now in central London, outside, like generally speaking, and he was like, I'm just going to wait. Yeah, but no, it's true, right? Because you are like in some parts, even within London, but I know outside of London, people have been paying so much more just because there's been that competition between buyers.
Yes,
and you're saving 15k.
That's going to continue.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's where
I credit the seller, because he's probably priced his property right, created that competition, and that's where it really comes from.
Sellers, and I think, look, people are simple in many ways, and the behaviors of humans is like, if you see a lot of people buying property, if you see this buzz in the media, people will follow. They're like sheep, a lot of people. Honestly, it's just how it is, right? We've seen it so many times, and I think when you've got all of this being talked about in the press, you will get people who think, oh great, I'm saving on the stamp duty. But what they don't realize, if they're not in the industry or they don't speak with the right people, that's why it is important to have someone who's trustworthy, is an expert in what they do. Because a lot of agents, they don't give a shit. Yeah, that's just the reality. But you know, if you speak with experts, they will advise you accordingly and be like, nah, you're going to be overpaying for this, or you know. And I think that's what it is. People just seeing all this rush, thinking, oh, I'm saving so much money, not realizing on the back of that they've just overpaid for a property.
For it,
yeah, exactly. Or if worse, you're paying more than what you should be. So you're 15k saving or whatever it is, it's void. It's not relevant. But that obviously doesn't happen so much in central London because it's a different kind of thing. But for anyone watching who's kind of buying outside of London, I think it's very important, and we've said this so many times now, I think it's for the last 6 months or so, be careful not to overpay.
Be careful not to get caught up in the hysteria.
Yes,
exactly. All this hype about, you know, stamp duty, because the reality is we're 8 weeks away from the 30th of June, and then it's being tapered off. It goes down to 250. Exactly. I think we're going to see a lot of more realistic kind of. We're not going to see that hype, I don't think, unless, well, in central London, obviously the international buyers might change a few things once they compete with domestic.
On the outskirts, domestic will cool off, and central will probably heat up a bit from the low base of the international. In summary, isn't it?
So I guess the main takeaway for today is, guys, we're looking at massive lifestyle changes, which has driven the property market in central and outside as well, but more definitely in central London. I think the lack of supply, lack of good stock has been an issue for developers and investors. Equally, where there's been a lot of properties gone under offer, that kind of new amount of new listings is slowly it's slow at catching up. In central London, Chris, I think we're looking at probably a really good later half of the year with the international market.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Last quarter of the year should pick up. 100%. Still not quite there yet. Got busy a little bit like in Maida Vale over the past few weeks. Quietened off again. So
I think what's worth mentioning is for us, and I think again it just shows how people's behavior changes things and how they react to property or buying a property. We've just had the restrictions lifted 2 weeks ago. Yes. People have been able to go al fresco dining, they've been able to go for a pint, for a haircut, whatnot. That's changed massively because I think a lot of people after, was it 4 months we've been in lockdown, more or less, plus the winter. Everyone's right now, priority is to book, to go out for a drink, catch up with friends. And I think
which is distracting them from
buying. Absolutely. And they're starting to spend money, which is not good because all that saving that should go toward the property. But I think that's really important to know because I think these 2 weeks have been slower than usual because of that change.
Because people are out for pints. I
genuinely think that, and I think it's just true. People are enjoying the freedom.
It's nice to be out and about again. It feels like it's been a while.
And we've had good weather as well. I mean, still not great for April, but I think now, people are. That's definitely impacted, in my opinion, the level of because before people were bored sitting at home checking Rightmove, Zoopla, let's inquire about this, let's see a property. Whereas now people are like, oh, shopping, let's go for a drink, let's go for dinner. So that's changed, and obviously restrictions are hopefully easing again on the 17th of May with international travel resumed. So those air bridges because they're going to be green zones for certain countries that won't need to quarantine. It'll be very interesting to see what those countries are because I have a feeling places like Hong Kong, green. So you'll get an influx of buyers from the Far East, honestly.
And those will impact specific areas.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that you'll have the Hong Kong buyers buying mainly out of Belgravia,
buying a lot of new builds, builds. I think they're going to do really well because that's their thing. Middle East markets, I think there's going to be a lot of Middle Eastern buyers.
Hit the W1, W2 market, then you'll have the European market will come to you.
So it's going to be really interesting.
It'll be very interesting.
I think the podcast we'll do at the end of May will be interesting to talk about the demographics. That are active in
the demographics and the layers of building up the property market. Specific demographics, like you say, they are kind of W1, W2 better than anyone, right? And that is a very heavily dominant Middle Eastern market. And those guys haven't really been around,
active, but they've got the cash. So very interesting things coming up this summer. I think it really changes. That's one thing. It's constantly changing. No week is the same.
It's changed massively since we did the last one, hasn't it?
Massively, and it will continue to be.
It still hasn't been produced because you've been too busy.
Yes. So exactly. Episode 27, I think, the one before this.
But you're going to be able to get both of these out right now.
Yes.
No pressure. Don't put pressure on it.
Look, it's a bank holiday weekend. I'll try and get both of them out. But like Chris said, I have actually generally been a lot busier in the last couple of weeks, so I actually haven't had time to edit the previous one. But anyway, that's a good thing. So look, lots to talk about. I think, look, the fact that sometimes we do these podcasts and we do prepare, because obviously we need to give you guys a lot of value, but a lot of the times there's so much to talk about just from our on the ground experience.
But I mean, let's be honest, most of it is off the cuff, isn't it? Really,
it is.
The majority of it is off the cuff. There's a few points that we put in there.
I mean,
that's the value of the podcast, no?
Exactly, because it's easy to. I think. Well, exactly. Like today, literally before we started filming, we're like looking at some articles to get some figures, and the rest is literally fresh off the press from the ground. And I think that's what's nice about it, because it's like very loose. We used to have a very kind of structure to it, but I think right now there's so much going on from your side, from my side. There's so much to talk about. We're struggling to keep it under 50 minutes, and this is all live stuff. It probably you'll hear from us first before you see it in a paper and a research report, whatever. And I think that's what's good about it, that we're literally talking about stuff that's happening on the ground now. But bear in mind, I do have to edit the podcast a lot quicker, so you might get the news a little bit. Anyway, so we look forward to talking about the next changes and the next things, trends and news about the London property market in the next episode. Thank you for obviously paying attention once again. And if you do have any questions, by all means, we're happy to answer them. We're happy to present them in the podcast. And if you're looking for obviously investment opportunities, Jaffa is your man. If you're looking in central London, we'll be happy to help, Chris and myself. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for paying attention.
Thanks, guys.